thousands facing genocide as the world watches. Deadly Egypt road accident kills at least 35. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. This is World Today. I'm Otto Othman. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said the people in the Gaza Strip are facing a war of genocide and massacres committed by the Israeli occupation forces in full view of the entire world. Israel has blockaded and bombarded Gaza for 3 weeks as civilian casualties continue to mount up. Western countries have generally backed the Israeli claimed as self-defense, but there has been mounting international concerns over the toll from the bombings. Health authorities in the Gaza Strip said more than 8,000 Palestinians have been killed so far. The United Nations warned thousands more civilians could die as Israel said its forces were still operating inside Gaza more than 24 hours after entering the Hamas-run territory. Israeli forces waged ground operations against Hamas in Gaza in what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the second phase of war aimed at crushing the group. Hamas's armed wing said it was ready to release the hostages it abducted if Israel freed all the Palestinian prisoners it was holding. The conflict is the fifth and deadliest in Gaza since Israel unilaterally withdrew troops and settlers from the Palestinian territory in 2005. Gaza's besieged residents faced a near-total communications and internet blackout as Israel's warplanes dropped bombs and its troops and armored pushed into the enclave. Meanwhile, billionaire Elon Musk said his Starlink satellite service would support internet access for internationally recognized aid organizations in Gaza, which have faced a telecommunications blackout since February. Musk, who owns Starlink operator SpaceX, was responding to a post by U.S. Democrat Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in which she called the communications blackout in Gaza unacceptable. UN agencies and NGOs had earlier on Saturday reported that they had lost contact with their teams in the Gaza Strip. UN resident and humanitarian coordinator Lynn Hastings said hospitals and humanitarian operations cannot continue without communications. Starlink is a network of satellites in low Earth orbit that can provide internet to remote locations or areas that have normal communications infrastructure disabled. Israel is recalling its diplomatic staff from Turkey after the country's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan condemned the inhumane military campaign on Gaza. Erdogan's party staged a massive rally in Istanbul, which drew an estimated crowd of 1.5 million people. During the rally, Erdogan called the Israeli government as occupier and war criminal, out to eradicate Palestinian people. He also questioned Israel's military response towards Hamas' assault earlier on October 7th, which has killed thousands of Palestinians, including women and children. The president said that the Israel was a pawn in the region that was being used by Western powers to stamp their authority in the West Asia region. Israel ordered the return of all diplomatic staff from Turkey moments after Erdogan finished his remarks. Israel and Turkey had only just agreed to reappoint ambassadors last year. There were also restarting discussions on a US-backed natural gas pipeline project. Erdogan has been a leading international supporter of Palestinian rights during his two-decade rule. He has become much more vocal after taking a more cautious line in the first days of Israel-Hamas conflict escalated on 7th October. Tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched in central London, calling for an immediate ceasefire in the deadly war between Israel and Hamas. It was the third consecutive weekend that the British capital was the venue for a large rally in support of Palestinians. The protests in London came as Israel's army intensified its assault on the war-torn Gaza Strip late Friday. According to British media, about 100,000 people joined the March for Palestine. The demonstrators gathered at Central Point by the River Thames at midday before making their way to the UK Parliament in Westminster. Other rallies also took place in Manchester and Glasgow, Scotland. Meanwhile, around 10,000 of pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched in Berlin's Kreuzberg district to demand freedom for Palestine. Organizers had called the rally under the title Global Majority United to protest apartheid and oppressive regimes. Hundreds of flags and signs critical of the Israeli and the German government could be seen among the crowd marching through one of Berlin's most multicultural neighborhoods. Over in France, at least 1,000 people marched in solidarity with Palestinians in Marseille, southern France. Organizers said 4,000 people took to the streets, while police put the figure at 1,800. Other protesters, including elected officials, also joined demonstrations in Paris, defying a court ban issued by public order grounds. In Brooklyn, thousands of New Yorkers took to the streets calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Pro-Palestinian protesters marched from Brooklyn to Manhattan, holding signs and waving flags while chanting slogans. According to local media, Brooklyn Bridge was closed due to the protests, with members of the Orthodox Jewish community were also seen gathering ahead of the march in support of Palestinians. Still ahead, fire at Kazakh mine steals at least 32. At least 35 people were killed and more than 50 others injured in a horrific collision on an Egyptian highway involving a bus and several cars. According to the Egyptian Ministry of Health, the traffic accident occurred near the Wadi al-Natrun region in the northern part of the country, involving a passenger bus and several vehicles on the Cairo-Alexandria Desert Road. Al-Ahram news website reported that at least 18 of the fatalities were burned to death in the incident. Images posted on social media showed an overturned lorry laying across the fast lane on charred tarmac. Further on is at least one bus and a minibus, both largely gutted by fire, as well as many cars, which were burnt in flames. Crowds of people can be seen standing by the road, gazing at the crash site as alongside queues of cars as thick smoke spirals into the air. Traffic accidents are common in Egypt, where roads are often in bad repair and the highway code is frequently disregarded. Official figures say 7,000 people were killed in road accidents in 2021 in the Arab world's most populous country. Meanwhile, in Kazakhstan, at least 32 people died in a fire at an ArcelorMittal mine, with moreover a dozen still missing in the worst of such disasters in years, prompting the nationalization of the company's local affiliate. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev ordered his government to take control of the Kazakh branch of the company after the fire which followed a methane explosion at the Kostenko mine in the central Karaganda region. The Emergency Situation Ministry said the search for the missing miners is ongoing, but there is very little chance of finding them alive. More than 250 people were working on site at the time of the explosion. It also said the fire occurred because measures to improve ventilation were not being carried out, which in turn led to a lethal level of methane pollution. ArcelorMittal, led by Indian businessman Lakshmi Mittal, has a history of deadly disasters in Kazakhstan and is regularly accused of failing to respect safety and environmental regulations. The fire was one of the deadliest in Kazakhstan post-Soviet history and came just 2 months after 5 miners were killed in a blast at a site owned by the company. ArcelorMittal promised compensation and said it would cooperate with authorities. The company operates around a dozen mines in the highly polluted industrial region of the vast, resource-rich nation, formerly part of the Soviet Union. Former Vice President Mike Pence has announced that he is withdrawing from the U.S. presidential race, saying it was not his time. Pence has become the first major 2024 candidate to suspend his campaign.
Traveling across the country over the past 6 months, I came here to say it's become clear to me this is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today. Now, I'm leaving this campaign, but let me promise you, I will never leave the fight for conservative values, and I will never stop fighting to elect principled Republican leaders to every office in the land.
Pence, along with most of his rivals seeking to be the Republican Party's nominee for next year's White House race, never gained momentum in a contest overwhelmingly dominated by former President Donald Trump. The New York billionaire has overcome scandals and 2 impeachments and is currently battling multiple criminal prosecutions, yet retains fervent support from the party faithful. Pence's surprise exit marks a key moment in the campaign, underscoring the difficulty for even Trump's loyal lieutenant in overcoming his former boss in the race to see who challenges Democratic President Joe Biden. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at huge crowds of Bangladesh opposition supporters to break up a giant protest against the Prime Minister, with at least 1 officer killed and scores of others people injured in several hours of violent clashes in central Dhaka. More than 100,000 supporters of 2 major Bangladesh opposition parties rallied to demand Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to step down to allow a free and fair vote under a neutral government. The clashes began in front of the city's largest Catholic church when rowdy opposition supporters fought with sticks and allegedly torched the bus and a police post. The violence spread in rows in alleys in the center of capital as police fired tear gas and rubber shotgun rounds while the protesters threw stones and bricks. The protests were the biggest so far this year and marked a new phase in their demonstrations, with a general election due within 3 months. Sheikh Hasina, daughter of the country's founding leader, has been in power for 15 years and has overseen rapid economic growth, with Bangladesh overtaking neighboring India in gross domestic product per capita. But inflation has risen and her government is accused of corruption and human rights abuses. An Iranian high school student died yesterday, nearly a month after falling into a coma in disputed circumstances on the Tehran metro. The Borna news agency affiliated with the youth ministry said Armita Garawand, a student in Tehran, died after intensive medical treatment and 28 days of hospitalization in intensive care. The 17-year-old ethnic Kurd, who was declared brain dead a week ago, had been hospitalized at the Fajr hospital in Tehran since 1st October after she fell unconscious on the metro. The circumstances of the incident have been disputed, with metro surveillance footage which had been broadcast on state television showing the unveiled teenager being evacuated after fainting in a carriage. Gawaran's case was first reported on October 3rd by a Kurdish-focused rights group, which said she had been critically wounded during an incident on the underground train network. Authorities said she suffered a sudden drop in blood pressure and denied that any physical or verbal altercations had taken place between her and other passengers. But rights groups have said the teen was critically wounded during an alleged assault by female members of Iran's morality police. In sports, South Africa claimed record 4th Rugby World Cup. South Africa produced a magnificent defensive display to edge New Zealand 12-11 in a compelling arm wrestle of a World Rugby World Cup final and win the Webb Ellis Cup for a record 4th time. Only a single yellow card had been shown in 9 previous World Cup finals, but the crackdown of foul play in the game led to 4 being handed out over 80 minutes of the intense rugby played in front of a crowd of 80,000 at the Stade de France. All Black skipper Sam Cane suffered the ignominy of being the first player to be sent off in a title decider when his card for a high tackle was upgraded to a red after a bunker review just before half-time. Despite playing for 3/4 of the match, a man short, however, the All Blacks stuck to their ball-running game plan and scored the game's only try through Breeden Barrett to get within a point of the lead just before the hour mark. The Springboks, led by man of the match Peter du Toit, managed to hold firm under huge pressure over the final quarter, and Andre Pollard's 4 first-half penalties proved sufficient to add another title to those of 1995, 2007 and 2019. In soccer, Real Madrid battled back to win 2-1 at Barcelona in a nervy La Liga El Clasico thanks to a second-half brace by top scorer Jude Bellingham, who continues to impress with his superb form. Barca dominated the first half and Ilkay Gundogan found the ball at his feet for an easy tap-in after Real defender Aurelien Tchouameni passed backwards to centre-back David Alaba, who barely reached the ball. Midfielder Fermin Lopez, who hit the post in the 15th minute, and forward Joao Felix were a constant menace to Real's defence and created several chances to score, with Real arguably lucky to go into the break only 1 goal down. Andres Christensen headed on to the post after the break, and goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga made a brilliant save to deny Barca from a Ronald Araujo close-range strike. Real Madrid started to find the mojo after manager Carlo Ancelotti brought Eduardo Camavinga and Luka Modric off the bench, and Bellingham once again shone under the spotlight. He unleashed an unstoppable strike from the range into the upper left corner in the 68th minute, and then, in stoppage time, he scored the winner after collecting a Modric pass inside the box. Real Madrid are top of the standings on 28 points, level with Gorina. Barca are third in 24, 2 ahead of Atletico Madrid. Al Nassr saved their best for the second half to take all 3 points in 3-1 win at the Al Failah in the Saudi Pro League. After a first-half stalemate, Cristiano Ronaldo set up the opener for Anderson Talisca in the 50th minute, the Brazilian firing home from the edge of the box. Talisca doubled the lead 11 minutes later when he headed home from Alex Tessel's cross before Al-Faiha held the lead 5 minutes later, with captain Hussein Al-Shuaish heading in from an Abdel Hamid Sabiri free kick. But the visitors put the result beyond doubt after 74 minutes when Otavio cracked in a shot from the edge of the penalty area. The result means Al Nassr move back up to second in the table, 4 points behind leaders Al Hilal. Al Faiha, meanwhile, are in the 8th place with 14 points. We move on to the English Premier League news. Arsenal continued demonstrating their dominance by demolishing Sheffield United, while Chelsea slumped to another damaging home defeat against Brentford. Now let's take a look at some of the Matchday 10 results. Now in tennis, Felix Auger-Aliassime of Canada defeated top seed Holger Rune 6-3, 6-2 in the semi-finals of the ATP 500 Swiss Indoors Basel tournament, ending the Danes' first tournament under the guidance of Boris Becker. The Canadian arrived in Basel having won just 4 of his past 12 matches, but has looked closer to his best at the ATP 500 event. In an all-action display against Rune, Auger-Aliassime broke the Danes' serve 4 times to earn his first top 10 win of the year. Rune, after a poor run of form, had teamed up with Becker to reach the semi-final stage in Basel, but Auger-Aliassime dominated from the start, breaking Rune's opening service game and then twice more in the second set for a comfortable win in just 83 minutes. It would be Auger-Aliassime's first final since winning the title at the same event last year. He will face 4th seed Robert Hukacz of Poland, who battled past unseeded Frenchman Igor Hubert 6-4, 3-6, 7-6 in the other semi-final. Charles Leclerc swept to pole position for the Mexico Formula One Grand Prix, with Charles Sainz qualifying second in a surprise Ferrari front row lockout. The Italian team had seemed slow in final practice, with Leclerc 13th and Sainz 15th, but they pulled the time out of the hat when it mattered. Triple world champion Max Verstappen will start in third place for Red Bull, chasing a 51st career win and a record 16th of the season, with Australian Daniel Ricciardo a stunning fourth for Alpha Tauri after returning from a broken hand. Red Bull's Sergio Perez qualified fifth for his home race, with Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton sixth after being fastest in the second phase. Sainz, the only driver to beat the dominant Red Bull this season with victory in Singapore, was also stunned to be on the front row. Verstappen was fastest initially in the final phase, but worried about his car's floor after hitting the curb hard in turn 8 before Sainz went faster, and then Leclerc put himself on provisional pole. The final flying laps did not change the order, and the Monegasque could celebrate his second pole in a row after Austin, Texas last weekend. From giant puppet Little Amal to ancient winged sculpture, take a look at amazing offbeat stories this week. The internationally known 12-foot-tall Little Amal, a 10-year-old Syrian refugee girl's puppet, recently visited migrant families to kick off a journey along the Mexico-US border. Amal, which means hope in Arabic, visited the border wall by the Rio Bravo, where migrant families camp waiting for their chance to cross the border and finish their dangerous long journey. The Walk with Amal organization said the giant puppet will participate in events on both sides of the border until 6 November, and in a 1,200-mile-plus journey that aims at spurring conversations about the role of refugees. The Hans Spring Puppet Company created her as part of an effort to raise awareness about the plight of unaccompanied refugee children.
She went to the border to really symbolize all those kids that are trying to cross over. The kids that are looking for that hope, for that better place. Some of them are fleeing violence. Some of them are fleeing conditions that are not adequate, that are not safe. And it's a message of hope, right? Looking for a better future.
Little Amal is brought to life by 4 puppeteers, including one inside her frame walking on stilts, who also operates a complex system of strings that control the puppet's facial expressions. There are also puppeteers operating each arm and one supporting her back. Following a fetid 4-decade career, which saw him claim Best Supporting Actor at the French equivalent of the Oscars this year, Belgian film actor Bouli Lenners is increasingly turning from the silver screen to puppetry. After inheriting last year a collection from his father-in-law, whose family had run one of Lige's famed puppet troupes, is now looking to set up his own theater in his backyard with his wife. In an age of computer-enhanced superhero blockbusters and streaming services, the couple might seem to be swimming against the tide. But Lenners is convinced there is still room for the slower form of entertainment that has always had a special place in the working-class town of 200,000 in eastern Belgium. Lenners and his wife hope to stage 2 performances each week from January in their 30-seater theater. Their troupe consists of an impressive series of around 160 characters and animals including donkeys, snakes and dragons, which they will manipulate at arm's length behind the stage. A dig in northern Iraq has unearthed a 2,700-year-old alabaster sculpture of the winged Assyrian deity Lamassu, which was found largely intact despite its large dimensions. The dig's French leader, Pascal Bousselin, said only the head was missing, and that was already in the collection of the Iraq Museum in Baghdad after being confiscated by customs officers from smugglers in the 1990s.
I think it's now the head is in Baghdad Museum. The rest of the body has been found here and it's in an excellent shape. And so we are very glad to have found that, and we can now study the whole context of this beautiful gate, which might still be in very good condition.
Betterlin said the 18-ton sculpture measuring 3.8 by 3.9 meters was made with great attention to detail. Erected at the entrance of the ancient city of Khorsabad, some 15 kilometers north of the modern city of Mosul, the sculpture shows the Lamassu, an Assyrian deity with a human head, the body of a bull, and the wings of a bird. It was commissioned during the reign of King Sargon II, who ruled from 722 to 705 BC, and erected at the city's gates to provide protection. A quarter of a century in the making, Greece's capital Athens recently opened a museum honoring legendary soprano Maria Callas, billed as the first of its kind in the world. Designed to mark the centenary of her birth, the museum showcases over 1,300 exhibits, including Callas's school scrapbook, described books and sheet music, opera, dresses, and also photographs. A listed 4-story building from the 1920s that previously housed a hotel, the custard-colored museum near central Syntagma Square took over a decade to complete at a cost of $1.6 million.
Αυτό λοιπόν είναι ένα μουσείο για όλους. Δεν είναι μόνο για ειδικούς, δεν είναι μόνο για φανατικούς οπαδούς της σκάλας ή φανατικούς οπαδούς της όπερας, γιατί είναι δύο διαφορετικές συνομοταξίες ανθρώπων. Είναι βασικά για αυτούς που τους αρέσει, αγαπούν τη μουσική. Οπότε μου φαίνεται πως όλοι θα το ευχαριστηθούν και αυτό το καταλάβουμε.
The collection began 24 years ago when the city acquired some Callas items at the Paris auction. Among the collection's top exhibits are the soprano's personal photo album, her backstage mirror, and her prescription glasses, which she almost never wore in public. There are also monogrammed matchbooks given to her by airlines and hotels on her final world tour in 1973-74. In the remote southwestern Kyrgyz city of Kadamjay, the local Soviet-era House of Culture shelters a workshop for a group of around 20 women who gather there several times a week to weave traditional Kyrgyz rugs known as shirdak. The group have set themselves the mission of passing their craft on to the next generation, a task harder than it may first seem in a country where many families are separated by immigration. Among the group of weavers is Tashkan Kakimova, who said that this pastime serves to keep her busy and make some extra money in addition to her pension. Kakimova is one of the shrinking number of mostly elderly people living in Central Asian countries, mountainous areas who know how to make a shridak. Many worry the ancient art will die out. UNESCO has warned that the skill of making the unique rugs is in need of urgent safeguarding, with an abundance of synthetic carpets and the young being mostly disinterested. And that wraps up World Today. In our top story, Gazans facing genocide as the world watches. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight, coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. Thank you for watching. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Ang Moto Othman Malaysia Madani, Teka Perpaduan, Penuhi Harapan.